Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of Cult Classic Movies. This week we delve back into the vault. We're going back roughly more than 30 years for this movie. 30, even more than 30 years. Way back to 1988 to the Fight Martial Arts Supreme movie, one of the most iconic martial arts movies of all time, Bloodsport, featuring Jean Claude Van Damme, Gibb, Bolo Yeung, Forest Whitaker, and our special guest tonight, Leah Ayres, who played the role of Janice Kent. I suppose, Leah, little did you know, I suppose, back in 1988, when you got that role in Bloodsport, alongside starting out sort of Jean Claude Van Damme, that in terms of iconic movies that are probably, in terms of martial arts movies, that'll go down in history, and nearly up to nearly 40 years later, coming up to 40 years later, we're still talking about it.
Yes, no, I had no idea for sure. And I just want to mention that, we actually shot that movie in the fall of 86. We were in Hong Kong, in the fall of 86. I mean, I know it didn't come out, but right, it's even older from when we actually shot it.
And I suppose, Leah, as an actress, as a budding sort of young actress, were you based in the Middle East at the time, in terms of the Far East, I say, in terms of China, Hong Kong, Japan, or were you based, or was it a gig that you got in terms of Los Angeles and you knew straight away that it entailed foreign travel?
Yes, actually, I did live in Los Angeles. I lived in New York before that, but I was living in Los Angeles when I got that role. And I knew it meant going to Hong Kong.
And Leah, how did the opportunity come about for you to get cast as Janice Kent? I suppose Bloodsport was starting out at that time. I suppose very different audition process to what we have now there today in terms of movies. Was it a bit similar in one sense? Did you have to go through a rigorous sort of process to land the role?
No, I mean, I went through the normal audition process, right? Which could be considered grueling just in general, if you wanted to look at it that way. But no, it was, I went to an audition. I guess I went to a callback. There wasn't really anything out of the ordinary about the audition process.
And in terms of Bloodsport, in terms of the martial arts sort of movie, coming to China and coming to Hong Kong to sort of film in that movie, in terms of production, was that a long sort of winded production? Were you 2 months, maybe more, in the Far East?
Let me see. I think it was about a 6 to 8 week shoot. Maybe the shoot itself was 6, maybe a little bit over, but because we had to get there in time to kind of recover from jet lag before we started working. But I was excited to go. It was thrilling to be in Hong Kong. And you want me to tell a funny story?
Yep, fire away. Yep.
Okay, well, when I first got there and started working, I was just like in a room with a whole bunch of extras, and I didn't have any place to go between scenes. And so I was like, what is going on here? I need a place, right? Jean Claude had a whole trailer, like a whole Winnebago, and I literally had no place. And I went back to the director and the producer. I said, what? And they said, oh, we're working on it. The next day, still no dressing room. And I said, this is not okay. It is in my contract. I need to have a place to go. Now, I'm not just going to, hang out here. So, because days can be really long, right? You need to have a place to be quiet, to be private, to do what you need to do to prepare and to recover, etc. So I threatened to leave, and I really would have, but I went. They said, no, we figured it out. So I went the next day, and they had created a dressing room for me, which was my own little, those VW vans?
Yep.
Old Volkswagen vans, right? They were like little hot dog shaped things. Well, they'd taken all the seats out, and they'd put little curtains up around the window. and they'd gotten a chair and everything. So I had my own little dressing room in my VW van.
And Leah, in terms of Bloodsport getting the gig, I suppose, were you sort of aware of had John Claude when you got the gig? Did you know who was in the film with you in terms of when you signed on for the dotted line, or were you aware of any the other actors starting out? Because an awful lot of you were sort of budding sort of actors and actress at that period.
You know, sometimes in movies, when they think it's super important, right, they'll make sure to have the lead actors, you know, meet each other or work together a little bit so they can just see that, you know, there is chemistry or there's something that works. In this situation, there was not. First of all, none of us really, I mean, we'd all been working actors a little, you know, but Jean Claude hadn't done very much.
No.
I had been in a star of another classic movie called The Burning, which is a classic horror movie from the early 80s. But you know, we were all just working actors. There was no, you know, there was no star here. This was like a low budget, SAG minimum kind of a movie, right? So, you know, they weren't worried about any of that stuff. We just all met on the set and we just made it work.
And Leah, in terms of, I suppose it had an all-star cast in terms of martial artists, some of the best martial artists in the world, karate sort of champions, judo sort of champions as well. And in terms of the scene shooting, having to watch on some of those sort of scenes where you're watching on the background, were you sort of blown away by some of the actual fight scenes that went on in terms of the skills and the expertise of these martial artists?
It was impressive for sure. And I actually learned more about it. It wasn't something that I knew anything about or cared about. So at first I wasn't really even appreciating what I was seeing. Okay. Right. But the more I saw and the more I talked to some of the people and got to know, you know, I started to really appreciate the level of skill. I mean, I had been a dancer, so like I did understand the physical skills happening there. And was really started to appreciate what they were doing, not just as fighters, but then having to choreograph those fights and making them look real, but not getting hurt.
And Leah, in terms of your character, Janice Kent, she was a budding sort of journalist who sort of broke all the boundaries in terms of trying to achieve what she wanted. And she sort of everything was about the storyline, and she go extra above, and that even sort of meant giving into sort of other temptations just to get the lead, a sort of a use and abuse sort of an attitude in terms of trying to get the big break in terms of getting that story that she wanted about the Kumatai.
Well, that was kind of the theme of the whole movie, wasn't it? Isn't that the theme of the Kumite? Right? So it made sense to have, you know, her character arc dealing with that same question. What's worth what here? Right? Is the story worth lying, breaking rules, hurting people, you know, like what is worth what? I think that's the theme of the whole movie, really. I mean, I know it seems like it's just about the fighting, but I think it's really, for all of us, the question is, right, excellence at what cost?
Yeah. And Leah, in terms of Bloodsport, I suppose, were you sort of, when the premiere came out of it, in terms of the reaction, sort of initially, and then I suppose the audience sort of grew and grew. Were you taken back, or were you blown back by the initial sort of reaction? And when you saw the premiere of the movie for the first time as a cast, what was all of your take on it?
Well, I had done some what they call looping, so I had seen a little bit of the movie, but I really hadn't seen that much until the opening, and I was pleased. You know, I mean, I felt like they'd really captured, you know, Hong Kong, and right, that the movie really worked. So I was pleased with the movie. I was happy about it, and then really, in fact, I just moved on. You know what I mean? Like I moved on to the next project, the next thing. How I'm still surprised daily that people, right? How long ago? This was 1986. I shot that movie. That people still recognize me, right? My husband's a writer producer for television, and you know, going onto the set, if he has stuntmen there, they're always like, oh, right? That's what surprises me more than anything, right? That it still has such, you know, significance for so many people.
And Leah, in terms of the sequels to Bloodsport, initial Bloodsport, was there ever a sort of an opportunity for you to come back and stay involved in that sort of franchise, even in terms of cameo role or was you ever sort of approached on it?
No, I wasn't. No, I mean, I didn't even know there were sequels really until I guess like somebody told me there was not. No, it wasn't something they wanted to involve me in, I guess, because they never came to me with a sequel.
So at the time, you sort of Leah, you sort of took it as a standalone sort of a sort of a movie in terms of Bloodsport.
Yeah.
And Leah, in terms of the cast, I suppose, in terms of relationships, I mentioned Forest Whitaker, Donald Gibb, I mean, Bolo Yeung, Jean Claude Van Damme. Have you sort of kept in touch? I know it's a long time, but have you sort of kept in touch with any members of the cast, or have you seen anyone recently? Or I suppose over time, does
Yeah.
those sort of friendships fade?
Yeah, no, I didn't keep in touch with anyone, but I have fond memories, especially of Don Gibb and Forest Whitaker, just, you know, exploring Hong Kong, you know, supporting each other. They were really special.
And Leah, in terms of some of the martial artists and some of the stunts, in terms of some of those guys, Bolo Yeung, who played Chong Li, for example, were they sort of intimidating when you're on set to look at these guys in terms of their physique, in terms of their martial arts? Did they look daunting in some sense in terms of being cast
I'm,
in?
I'm not easily daunted, so no, I appreciated them, but you know, I couldn't really communicate with him in particular. He didn't speak English. Right. So, you know, we would nod at each other, but it wasn't like we had any scenes together really or anything. So, you know, it was really just appreciation from afar.
And Leah, in your career since, have you ever done anything similar to Bloodsport and martial arts, or was that sort of a one of a kind sort of a project for you in terms of your career? Have you experienced anything similar to that since?
Well, I worked with Chuck Norris on Walker, Texas Ranger. I
Okay.
did a recurring role on Walker. But that was probably, I'm trying to think if I did any other movies with a lot of martial arts in them. Not really. You know, I mean, I did some other movies of the week, and I mean, I did when I did a pilot called Velvet, which didn't go to series, but it was a 2-hour pilot, and we all had to learn how to, you know, fishtail the car and shoot and use like nunchucks and all that. So that was fun when I had to actually learn how to do more of that stuff myself.
And I suppose we all know in terms of scenes or clips that make the sort of final production in terms of movies, some scenes and clips don't actually make the sort of final cut. Was there any scenes for your character in terms of Janice that probably didn't make the cut in terms of the final thing, in terms of the final production
You
of
know
the
what?
movie?
It was when it was shot, it was a low budget movie. So they weren't shooting a lot of extra stuff. So there was no real scene that I was in that was in the script that was cut out of the movie. So no, nothing.
And Leah, in terms of, I suppose, working with a budding sort of young John Claude Van Damme back in the early 80s, what was that like? What was John Claude like back in his sort of youthful days? And what are your memories? And what was your memories the first time ever meeting Tim, or your first conversation? I know it's a long time ago in terms of, do you
No,
remember
I mean,
anything?
the truth is he was, you know, he was you know, kind of a cocky but charming, you know, young actor. I think that, you know, we didn't actually hit it off that well together, to tell you
Okay.
the truth. Um, so, you know, I think that I don't know. I think he was probably maybe a little intimidated by me. I don't know, but we just didn't hit it off. But he had a lot going on in his life, right? He
Okay.
had his pregnant, soon to be second wife on the set. He wasn't quite divorced from the first wife. I think there was a lot going on for him.
And I suppose, Leah, lastly, before I let you go, I suppose if, let's say there was a Bloodsport encyclopedia and all the movies, and they put your character, Janice Kent, into that encyclopedia, and they sort of left two blank sentences underneath her name. And they asked you, Leah Ayres, having portrayed the role of Janice Kent, to write those two sentences to sum her up. What would you like those two sentences to read?
I think that you said it earlier too, that she cared as much about being an excellent journalist and getting, the real story and the truth, as much as any of those fighters, cared about their craft and their skill. So she was definitely, that person, had that same kind of grit and determination, in her, in her own way. But that, I think that if there's a character arc there at all, I think that in pursuing it and then seeing that these guys were all willing to fight to the death, that she came to a place in herself where she had some boundaries now about what was worth it and what wasn't.
On that note, Leah Ayres, an absolute pleasure to talk to you today, to relive your memories in this week's Cult Classic Movies edition, delving back into the vault, back into 1988 for the classic movie Bloodsport. You played a prominent role, ever feature in the Bloodsport series, your portrayal of Janice Kent. A pleasure talking to you, Leah Ayres, and we wish you all the best in the upcoming year and also in your future endeavors.
Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to talk to you. You have
Cheers.
a happy new year too.
Cheers. Thank you, Leah.
Bye.